Look at your hand right now. Whatever shade it is, pale enough to catch a sunburn in 10 minutes, or dark enough to shrug off a full day outside that color, is not random. It's not decoration. It's the ending of a 300,000-year survival story that started with one very inconvenient star sitting 93 million miles away that has never once apologized for anything. Here's the part that surprises almost everyone. Every human who has ever lived traces back to the same starting point, same continent, same original skin tone. So if we all started the same, why does a crowd on any street on Earth look like 100 different shades of the same species? The answer involves melanin, vitamin D, a vitamin your ancestors could actually die without. A discovery from a 10,000-year-old skeleton that broke every assumption scientists had, and a farming decision that accidentally repainted an entire continent in a few thousand years. Let's get into it. Here's something most people never stop to think about. For almost the entire history of our species, there was no such thing as a white person, a black person, or an Asian person. Those categories are shockingly recent inventions. Around 300,000 years ago, when Homo sapiens first showed up in East Africa, every single person was dark-skinned. Not most of them, not the majority, all of them. There wasn't a lighter-skinned population hiding somewhere waiting to be discovered. Light skin, as a human trait, simply did not exist yet. And that makes sense once you know where humans were living. Equatorial Africa sits under some of the strongest, most relentless sunlight on the planet, the kind that quietly wrecks DNA over a lifetime of exposure if your body has no way to block it. That's exactly the job melanin does. Most people treat skin like it's just packaging the wrapping your organs came in. It's actually your largest organ, and one of its most important jobs is defense. Melanin is the pigment responsible for skin color, and it works like built-in sunscreen. The more melanin you have, the more ultraviolet radiation gets absorbed before it reaches the DNA sitting in your cells. Less DNA damage means fewer dangerous mutations, which means a lower risk of skin cancer over a lifetime. But there's a second, less obvious reason dark skin mattered so much in Africa, and it has nothing to do with cancer. UV radiation breaks down a molecule in your bloodstream called folate. Folate is essential for early pregnancy. It helps form the neural tube, which eventually becomes a baby's brain and spinal cord. Too little folate, especially in the first few weeks of pregnancy, can cause severe birth defects. So under intense equatorial sun, dark skin wasn't just useful. It was protecting two things at once: the DNA in every cell and the survival of the next generation. Evolution doesn't reward pretty. It rewards did you live long enough to have kids who also survived. Under the African sun, dark skin won that competition every single time. Then, humans did something that changed everything. They started walking. Somewhere between 60,000 and 100,000 years ago, groups of humans began leaving Africa. No plan, no maps, no single dramatic moment, just generations slowly spreading further than their parents had. Into the Middle East, into Europe, across Asia, eventually into places as extreme as Siberia, and somehow all the way into the Americas. And as they moved further from the equator, sunlight itself changed. At higher latitudes, UV rays hit the Earth at a lower angle, passing through more atmosphere, arriving weaker. Winters got long and dark. Skies stayed overcast for months. At first that sounds like a win: less UV, less damage. Except the same sunlight your skin blocks to prevent cancer is also the sunlight your skin needs to make something you cannot survive without: vitamin D. Your skin manufactures vitamin D using UV radiation. It's genuinely one of the strangest tricks the human body does, using sunlight as raw material to build something essential. And vitamin D isn't optional. It controls how your body absorbs calcium. Without enough of it, bones don't harden properly. In children, severe deficiency causes rickets, bowed legs, a flattened skull, stunted growth. In adult women, it can soften the pelvic bones badly enough to make childbirth dangerous or fatal. Now picture a dark-skinned population settling into northern Europe or northern Asia thousands of years ago. Their melanin is still doing exactly what it evolved to do, blocking UV, except there isn't much UV left to block, and what little exists, they desperately need to absorb. Their skin can't tell the difference between dangerous sun and sun I actually need. It just blocks. Vitamin D production drops. Bones weaken. Children get sick. Fewer babies survive to adulthood. So evolution reversed its own rule. Mutations that reduced melanin started spreading, not because anyone chose it, but because in low UV environments, slightly lighter skin meant slightly stronger bones. Slightly healthier pregnancies, slightly better odds of surviving to pass those genes on. Multiply that advantage across thousands thousands of generations, and you get the light-skinned populations of Northern Europe and Northern Asia today. Simple story, right? Dark skin near the equator, light skin near the poles, done. Except ancient DNA just blew that timeline apart. For a long time, scientists assumed European skin lightened gradually over tens of thousands of years as people moved north. Then, researchers sequenced the genome of a man who lived in what's now Britain roughly 10,000 years ago, nicknamed Cheddar Man. He had lived in Europe for thousands of generations by that point. Scientists expected pale skin. Instead, the DNA said something almost nobody predicted. Dark to medium dark skin, dark curly hair, and blue eyes. A combination that looks almost like a mismatch to modern eyes, because we're used to pairing blue eyes with very pale skin. The extremely fair skin now associated with Northern Europe didn't spread widely until roughly 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. In a species that's existed for 300,000 years, that's the final 3% of the timeline, practically yesterday. So what actually flipped the switch? The Neolithic Revolution, the switch from hunting and gathering to farming, changed almost everything about how humans lived. It also quietly rewired human skin color. Hunter-gatherers ate a diet naturally rich in vitamin D fatty fish, organ meat, shellfish. Even with darker skin absorbing less sunlight, their food was doing some of the work for them. Farming populations ate mostly grain, wheat, barley, oats. Their dietary vitamin D intake didn't just dip, it collapsed. Suddenly, people were almost entirely dependent on whatever their skin alone could produce. And if that skin was still fairly dark under weak northern sunlight, it wasn't enough. At the same time, farming villages were dense, large, and interconnected, very different from small scattered hunting bands. A helpful mutation in a village of a few hundred people, linked to dozens of other villages, can spread through a population far faster than the same mutation ever could in small, isolated groups. Diet collapse plus population density hit fast forward on a process that had been crawling along for tens of thousands of years. Within a few thousand years, it became visible enough to show up clearly in the archaeological and genetic record. Here's where the story gets genuinely strange. Europeans and East Asians both evolved lighter skin compared to their African ancestors. Same environmental problem, weak UV, not enough vitamin D. But when scientists compared the genes responsible, they found something unexpected. Many of the genetic variants are different. Two separate populations on two separate continents independently arrived at a similar solution using different genetic tools. Biologists call this convergent evolution, and when it happens, it's usually a sign that the pressure behind it was extremely strong. Strong enough that evolution solved the same problem more than once, from scratch, in isolation. And while we're on the subject of surprising genetic facts, every person alive today with blue eyes descends from a single individual who carried one specific mutation, somewhere near the Black Sea, roughly 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. Before that person existed, every human on Earth had brown eyes. Every one. Something we treat as an ancient, deeply rooted trait is, on an evolutionary timescale, barely older than farming itself. Here's the part that really should change how you think about all of this. Human skin color isn't three neat categories it never was. It's a gradient, shaped by exactly how much UV a population's ancestors were exposed to, how much vitamin D their traditional diet provided, and how much those populations moved and mixed over tens of thousands of years. That's also why the simple dark near the equator, light near the poles rule has exceptions. Some Arctic populations never became very pale, even living at extreme northern latitudes, because their traditional diet, rich in fish and marine mammals, was already loaded with vitamin D. When your food solves the problem, your skin doesn't have to. There's no line on a map where one kind of human begins and another ends. There are only populations whose ancestors adapted to different amounts of sunlight, layered on top of thousands of years of migration and mixing. Go back far enough, and every person on Earth, every shade, every continent, every ethnicity shares the same African ancestors. The visible differences we now build entire identities and histories around represent a tiny fraction of our species' timeline. A few thousand generations out of hundreds of thousands. So look at your hand again. That color isn't proof you're different from anyone. It's proof of exactly where your ancestors stood on this planet, how much sun hit their skin every day, and what they ate while their bodies quietly solved a problem that had nothing to do with identity and everything to do with survival. Dark skin isn't primitive. Light skin isn't advanced. Every shade in between isn't a compromise. They're all just different answers to the same question a star has been asking humanity for 300,000 years. How much of me can your body safely let in? lesson. The next time you see someone whose skin looks nothing like yours, remember you're not looking at a different kind of human. You're looking at a different chapter of the exact same story, written by the same sun on the same species that started in the exact same place. If this changed how you think about something as simple as skin color, hit subscribe, because next time we're covering another trait you were told was just how people are, and the real reason behind it might surprise you even more. See you in the next video.